What's going on, everyone? Dudette with Dudette Gaming, back with another Predecessor video. Today we're taking a deeper dive into the support role and looking at some essential tips that you need to dominate on the battlefield. So let's get into it. The support role is one of the most crucial roles in all of Predecessor. It's also arguably one of the most difficult roles to fulfill properly. I say this because if your team doesn't have a good support, it ultimately leads to your carry falling behind early mid-game. It leads to it being more difficult to take objectives and win team fights. When you understand your role, when you understand how to build and what to do properly in the game, it makes the game way more enjoyable and ultimately helps you help your team get further ahead so you can be more successful and win the game. So let's get into these tips. Tip number 1, prioritizing the carry and the team over yourself. The number one thing that supports struggle with is prioritizing their carry and the team. Unfortunately, so many people go into this game, no matter what role they play, with the mentality that they are the number one important character on the team. This, if you're in the support role, will ultimately lead to you and your team struggling. Your priority as the support character is to get your head out of the mindset of taking kills and taking last hits on minions. Because in the support role, early to mid game, it is your role to help the carry get kills and help the carry get as many last hits as possible. This will ultimately help your carry get further ahead during the game. That way, mid-late game, when a carry comes online, they can dominate. If you're going to be taking the kills and you're going to be taking the last hits of the minions, you actually reduce how much gold that your carry will get and how much experience they get as well. So you need to remember letting them get the last hits and letting them get the kills is important. Now, of course, there are times where a carry can't secure a last hit or they can't secure the kill. So sometimes it is okay to get kills. This doesn't mean you're not allowed to as a support character. But especially early mid game, you want to make sure your carry is getting ahead. And then mid-late game, your role shifts a little bit. You still want to help your carry, but now you have a little more freedom once your carry comes online to roam about the map. You can go help the lanes that are falling behind to catch up. The support role is so essential when it comes to helping your team. So you have to get yourself into that mindset. Don't be greedy, don't focus on kills, and don't worry about the CS because you will come online if you help your carry come online and then you help your team come online. Tip number 2, warding and dewarding properly. A support who's capable of warding and dewarding properly massively helps both the carry and the team get ahead. Wards are a tool that's built into every role's kit, which gives you vision in a place where you don't have vision, for example, through the fog wall into the jungle. One of the things you need to do is be mindful of where you place your ward. Placing your ward in a place in the jungle that will give you maximum vision of if the enemy is coming to your lane is essential. A lot of people will dump their ward quickly into the jungle without thinking of where it's going, thinking that that's good enough, but they leave wide open areas for the enemy to get around them. So you want to be mindful of where you're placing your wards. Another thing to remember is that as the support, later on in the game, you can have multiple wards. Wards are built up on a timer. So once you place a ward, it restarts on a timer so that you can get another ward. But the support later on in the game can have 2, and depending on the crest you build, even 3 wards. This makes it massively impactful in the game because you can have huge vision within the jungle. Wards will ping whenever the enemy appears in the lane. So another thing you need to be very mindful of and paying attention to as the support is those pings. It gives you a visual and it gives you an audio tone in the game. You'll see it on your minimap and you'll hear it. When you hear that sound, you want to alert your team as to where it has been pinged on the map. You have a brief moment on your minimap where it shows you where the enemy was. So use that opportunity to tell your team, hey, the jungle, for example, is moving to the left lane, or let your carry know, hey, I think the jungler or the mid laner is coming to our lane. We should back off. Wards are essential. Now, the second part of warding is dewarding. The support later on in the game has the ability when certain crests are evolved, or you have completed certain crests, the support has the ability to deward the enemy wards. Let's say, for example, the enemy team drops a ward in the jungle right next to the duo lane. You have the ability, once you have the upgraded ward, you have the ability to place your ward in the same range as theirs and then go and destroy their ward. When you do that, you deward them. They lose a certain amount of vision within the jungle, giving you an advantage. So be mindful of where you place your wards, putting them in key spots that don't leave openings. Be willing to deward, and also be willing to communicate with your team as the support to where you see on the minimap that the wards have pinged. This will ultimately help both your team, your carry, and yourself get ahead so that you guys can win. Tip number 3, working with your carry for lane control. Lane control is one of the most important skills that you can have as a support. Assisting your carry in making sure that the minions are positioned in a good spot at all times will absolutely help your carry get ahead and inadvertently help you get ahead. If you're playing as a ranged character, something that you can do every now and then is poke the enemy. Every time that you get a basic attack on an enemy hero, what you do is you draw the enemy minions towards yourself. So they stop engaging with your own minions in lane and they start coming after you for a brief amount of time. What you can do with this is you can actually pull the minions closer and closer to your tower. This gives you an advantage. It gives you an advantage so if the enemy wants to come and gank, they have less room to do so. And it also gives your team the advantage that if your jungler, for example, wants to come and gank the enemy, it's a lot longer distance that the enemy has to go to get back to safety within their tower. This also helps with controlling farming. This will do one of two things to the enemy team. One, it'll force them to stay further back if they don't want to get ganked, so they're not going to get the last hits and they're not going to get as much farm. Or two, it draws them closer to your tower into that bad position. Now there is a flip side to this, especially if you're playing as a melee support. What you may end up doing is drawing the enemy minions closer to their tower. This is something that I even struggle with quite a bit. When trying to complete the crest so that you can level up and evolve your character a little more, you often have to get basic attacks on either enemy heroes or minions whenever it pops. However, what you may end up doing when you go in for those basic attacks is you may give the enemy the opportunity to basic hit you, which will draw your minions closer to them. And they may do the exact same thing that you're trying to do to them. They may pull your minions closer to them. So, especially if you're a melee character, you're going to want to be careful of this so that you don't end up putting the lane in a bad position. Every time that you control the lane, you give yourself more opportunities for the enemy to be ganked, and you give your carry better opportunity and better safety to stay alive, to get the last hits, and to hopefully get some kills along the way. The fourth and final tip that I want to leave you with today is being able to adapt. A support who is able to actively adapt to a game will absolutely stay relevant and will help their team stay ahead or catch up if needed. Now, this comes in a couple of forms. The first form comes in counter-building the enemy. A good support is always willing to counter-build the enemy heroes that are getting ahead. For example, if the enemy has a character who is really beefy with lifesteal and you're having a hard time killing them during a fight, then look at the items that are supportive that do anti-heal. If you're, for example, going against a mid laner who's gotten far ahead and they're doing a lot of ability damage or magical damage, counter build with either crowd control or counter build them with better defense against whatever they're building. A good support can counter build on the fly. Now, this might mean that you have to delete some cards that have become irrelevant in your build, which also means you'll lose a little bit of gold every time you sell one of those cards. However, if you're able to stay relevant in a game, it shouldn't matter in the long run. The second part of adapting that you really need to pay attention to is not getting stuck in the rut of being stuck in your lane all game or being stuck to your carry's side. If you notice that mid-late game, your carry is able to take care of themselves, they're not dying a whole bunch, and they're getting kills all by themselves or in team fights, this gives you the opportunity to move out from the lane. Let your carry know that you're going to go support some other characters throughout the game. Now, this doesn't mean that you completely abandon them, but it does mean that you use the opportunities you have to go and assist other lanes or go and assist during different objective taking. A good support is able to communicate with their carry when they're coming and going, and a good support is able to adapt to any game that they play, staying relevant and staying potent during the fight. A good support is the backbone to every team in Predecessor. If you can effectively play the support role, you will absolutely help your team get closer to the goal of winning the game. A good support focuses on supporting their team and worrying less about themselves. I hope that this has been an informative video, and I hope that you've learned a lot. Feel free to leave a like and a subscribe, and I hope to see you guys in the battlefield. Peace.